Ladies and gentlemen, this is part 2 of the people who say that Thor Ragnarok has better CG than Justice League. Psalm 69 verses 33 and 34 says, "The Lord hears the poor and does not despise the prisoner. Let the heaven and the earth praise him, the seas and everything that moves therein." That's awesome to know that such a powerful person could actually hear the poor, the needy, the oppressed, and those who can't help themselves, and looks to help them. That's what power is supposed to do. Let's get into the video. If someone says that Thor Ragnarok has better CG than Justice League, ask them which background they can tell is CG and where does it begin. Good CG blends in and never is the focus. So if we look at this picture here and this one, which picture can you tell the background is CG? And if you pointed out that this picture above is such, you'd be right. Because, I mean, it's kind of obvious. If you go down here, you can't really tell, can you? You can't. And where does it begin? Well, it begins right at the beginning here. This entire boardwalk, we know, has to be CG. Okay? The boardwalk is CG. The people behind them, they're CGI rendered mocap. And some of them are not even real. They're part of the screen, which I believe is somewhere back there, is CG. So the walkway doesn't go to infinitum, like it says there. Now, like we said, good CG, really good CG in live action is not the focus. Meaning, you're not there to identify the CG. Even if it's a fantasy film. Take, for instance, a sci-fi, Blade Runner 2049. You see the protagonist approach a certain area. It seems to have junk all around it. And that area is actually a virtual world. It's not real. It's in the future, of course, and it's off-world, this Blade Runner story. But the important thing is that when you look in the behind-the-scenes footage, this guy who was staring at this here doesn't exist. Now, how are they able to pull that off? They're able to pull that off because, one, the level of detail that they put into their CG, and two, because of the cinematography. The CG conforms to the cinematography that's being shot. And what you find with artistic films, and there's a lot of art in certain films, is that you look at the tone of the film, and you look at the color palette of the film, and you look also at the details in the film. When you are going for, in science fiction and fantasy, a certain degree of realism, whether it's hyper-realism, whether it's a certain degree of grounded realism, this film has a certain degree of grounded realism, okay, then you have to up your CG to match that. And that's what good CG does. It matches it. And it's always going to be much tougher to make that CG than it is to do CG which has to do with films that don't really delve so much into realism as they delve into fantasy. So anytime you tell me that a film that's really delving more on the side of animation and fantasy has better CG than a film that is trying to push grounded realism, you'll never get me, because I already know the film that's going for realism is going to be the film that actually has the better CG. And there's a lot more work to put in that. Let me give you an idea of what I mean. If you look at a cartoon, people can break the laws of physics in a cartoon. You see cartoon characters in the wacky cartoons, especially. Their feet move in a circle. They run in the circle, right? And they take off, right? Now, if you upgrade that and you do it as a CGI animated feature, like, you know, the CGI Ninja Turtles that they have out there now, you go to a higher level where you still have to kind of conform to certain laws so that it looks real. You upgrade that and you move to, say, for instance, a high level mixed animation with live action sort of setting, where you have a real person in an animated setting sort of rendered into there. And then again, you got to upgrade. And then when you move to totally live action, even if it's fantasy, there's an upgrade there. And then when you go to live action with a certain degree of grounded realism, you upgrade again. And then when you go to live action, which is grounded in realism, where all the laws of physics and so on apply, and you're really trying to emulate with CG a realistic thing, then that's the height. Okay? So you have that. You have CG in all kinds of films, not just in fantasy, not just in sci-fi, but you also have in real films. Like, for instance, recently this film, I forgot what the name of it is, with Keanu Reeves, who, it was the sequel to the film where he was this assassin, his dog got killed, and he went after the people. There was a lot of CG in his film, and you wouldn't know that. Another film last year, which I can't remember the name of the film, but it stars Charlize Theron. There's some CG in that film as well, where glass breaks, tables break, and stuff like that. There's CG in it. And again, these films deal with realism. They're like reality-based films. Action reality. So, the CG is not supposed to be, it's supposed to be as good as it could possibly be. And that CG has to be top-notch. Now, why I say all of this is because you have to understand this film here, Justice League, deals with hyper-realism. It's a fantasy film. Yes, people fly, superpowered beings jump very high, people run very fast. That's the hyper part of it. But there's realism. It's grounded heavily in realism. And so the CG must fill that sort of realism. It's to be taken seriously. The characters are to be taken seriously. There may be some humor in there, but there's nothing that's breaking the laws of physics, except in the case of superpower, whatever. But they also explain why that happens. So it's like a sci-fi. Now, what's important for you to understand is when you look at this photo, or even if you watch it, the rendering of this, you have to understand that everything here is conforming to the laws of physics, the lighting, the character. So Steppenwolf, which is a completely CGI mocap character, and all of these parademons you see here are CGI. And also, some lights in this room, and also the room itself, some of it is CG. All right? And then it's also influenced, the CG must fall into line with the cinematography. And the cinematography here, you notice it's a unique angle to show how tall Steppenwolf is. It also is a cinematography that captures certain lighting. What I'm trying to tell you is that the rendering of these CG characters has to conform to all those specific rules, making this CG superior to a movie which does not conform to those rules. All right? And remember, film is art. It's not like video games. So that the art part of this also must be looked at and put into play. Let me show you what I mean. So if we look at Blade Runner 2049, here we have art. The lighting in here is a certain type of lighting to create a certain kind of tone. And the CG that is rendered must also reflect that tone and must reflect the cinematography. In this case, it must reflect the lighting, and it must behave as if it is an object that is being shot. The interesting thing about this is that the woman you're looking at right now, she is a complete CGI render. That is not a real woman you're looking at. That's a CG render of a known actress who played in the first Blade Runner movie. And it's very important to understand that you have to buy that. Nobody in the film ever highlights that or anything. It just fits in. This is fantasy, but it is grounded, most importantly, in a reality. So Blade Runner 2049 is a fantasy film, just like how, to some degree, Justice League is a fantasy film. But to make you believe this world is real, not make-believe now, but real. It's not a comic book thing. It's like something that could happen in time now, because it's live action. The CGI must conform to the cinematography. The cinematography is both art, and it is also both art, and it is also conforming to the laws and grounded in realism. That's when you're taking your character seriously. Similarly, Star Wars The Last Jedi was grounded in reality. Therefore, their CGI must reflect that reality. Even though Star Wars The Last Jedi does not conform to all the laws of physics, they still kept their cinematography intact and kept basically most of the laws of physics intact so that they could ground the film in a reality. They wanted you to take the film seriously, even though it's an adventure film, etc. And so the CGI that blends in this picture must blend in with the cinematography and with the tone that the cinematographer is trying to create. And it's very interesting. There's a lot of live action things going on in here, but there's also a lot of CGI and special effects that's going on in here. And of course, the lighting is probably CGI, and some of the fire in the background is CGI, and some of the structure is CGI. Okay? And that's good CGI. This is interesting. I really have to talk about this. Doomsday. You know, a lot of people said, oh, he looks like a Ninja Turtle, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, it's just interesting. Everybody was harping on Doomsday, right? In Batman v Superman. Doomsday was evolving. Doomsday conformed to the laws of physics. Doomsday was a threat. Doomsday felt like he was a threat. And also, Doomsday had all these details in it. Conformed to the laws of cinematography. If you look here, the camera is focused on Doomsday at a particular angle. Again, in the background is blurred out. And Doomsday, the rendering of Doomsday, this is very important, the rendering of Doomsday fits in with the environment. The environment is hyperrealism. So that means Doomsday here does not look like a cartoon character. He looks real, and he's rendered that way. All right. Here's the Incredible Hulk. Now, when we see the Incredible Hulk here, doesn't it look more like a cartoon? This feels like a 3D CGI render of a cartoon figure. There's not much details in his face. His face looks plasticky, looks kind of dead. And he moves in a comical fashion, if you've ever seen him in Thor Ragnarok. Even his outfit is sort of something I would not take seriously. I feel like this is a fantasy world. I feel like this is a world where I'm looking at cartoons, but it doesn't feel like I'm actually looking at a real world, as if the cartoon has come to life in the real world and is behaving like a real world creature. Remember, the Hulk is a creature. So here's the Hulk. Here's Doomsday. You tell me, which render looks more real to you? This one or this one? Which one feels more threatening to you? This one or this one? It's a very simple question. So I feel that Marvel went the direction of more animation than they went with realism and grounding their figures. So you have a more of an animated atmosphere, more fantasy. As such, these toys reflect that. And maybe it sells good toys. People loved it. Again, I feel that Marvel went the route of animation. Why do I say that? If you look at the mountains behind this place, and if you just look at the lighting, the mountains, just look at everything, all right? Even the character that Hela is looks like a live action person, a real person put into a animated world. So if I were to talk about the MCU, I think of it as a fantasy world where you get to see your live action people in an animated setting. Now, not necessarily it's always that way. Guardians of the Galaxy's example. You see live action people operating in an animated setting where physics and laws of nature do not apply. So that's what I get with Guardians of the Galaxy. This is what I get with Thor Ragnarok as well. So they're not limited to certain rules. And as such, because they're not limited to certain rules, now this world operates separately. So you have to judge it separately to how you would deal with other fantasies which are grounded in realism. Because this world doesn't feel like it's grounded in realism. It doesn't. And I want to show you something. Look at the mountains, particularly here. I'll come back to them. Don't they remind you of the mountains of Frozen? This is Frozen. Look at these mountains. Look at those mountains. Don't they feel like animated mountains? These mountains are based off the mountains of Norway, as apparently are these. So what I'm saying to you is, every time I saw this movie, I was like, this movie looks familiar. It reminds me of an animated cartoon. It reminds me of two. It reminds me of Disney's Maleficent, which is not a cartoon per se. There is a cartoon of Maleficent, but I'm talking about the movie Maleficent. Hela particularly reminds me of the witch in Maleficent. And also, it reminds me of Frozen. And that's it. The Frozen world, you know, the animated looking kind of worlds. That's what it reminds me of. I know this is Ragnarok, but Ragnarok has a different hue to it in this movie. If you go and watch Ragnarok from Thor, it looks a little bit different. If you look at Ragnarok from Thor: The Dark World, it looks a little bit different again. I just have the feeling that they're trying to move this. What they actually tried to do with these characters was move them into an animated atmosphere, which is why Hela's helmet, we know, I mean, you can feel it. It feels animated, right? But they don't make apologies for it. So they're saying, oh, this is an animated world, pretty much. We're going more towards fantasy, and because we're using a comedy, we can go towards fantasy, and therefore, now you will watch this and accept it. So people, for some reason, think that this is better CGI than, say, a grounded world like this one, and that's not so, right? And of course, they get you with the pretty colors, the kaleidoscopic colors. They dazzle you with that. So they say, oh, it's better CG. This world is better. The colors pop. Okay, let me show you what I mean again. Here's Loki. He's moving through, saving people, whatever. And if you look, this is the mountainside, right? Does that mountainside look real to you? No, it feels fantastical. It feels like a fantasy. CGI, right? How about this one? That mountainside looks real to you, doesn't it? What if I tell you that mountainside is CGI? You'd believe me? And that's great CGI. This world feels grounded, feels real, right? Great CGI. The CGI is better than Thor Ragnarok CGI. It has to be. There's a lot more work to do that CGI. To do more grounded, realistic work is always harder. It's like trying to do a portrait of a person and you just do basically the caricature. The caricature, you can exaggerate certain features, but if you have to do a portrait that echoes the splitting image of the person, it's much more work. It's much more difficult. And you have to know the details. It's a lot more details. Remember Planet of the Apes? War for the Planet of the Apes? That's not an ape. That's a CGI rendering of an ape. Again, it has to fit in with the cinematography. It has to fit in with the world. You understand what I'm saying? Which means the lighting, the way how it falls, the light falls on each fur pattern on the body of this render. You know there's not much rendering going on. There's rendering going on and stuff, but they're fitting it into the confines of a cartoon. Which is why this character here can fit in. And they have to do shading and lighting to conform these. Unbelievable. To conform these to the cartoon. Okay? This is great cinematography. There's CGI in here, clearly. He's obviously CGI, but there's also CGI off in the horizon and stuff. Some people ignorantly will say, well, the sky is red, so it's got to be CGI. Well, I mean, that doesn't have to be CGI because the sky is red. You can also tweak the color palette to get that. So it doesn't mean it's CGI because the sky is red. No, it's CGI in the background, and it's CG with Cyborg. when you were rendering the CG, you had to incorporate the CG in a render which would conform to the camera angle as well as the lighting as well as the focus of the camera. It's a lot more complicated than just straight rendering. So here you have beautiful CG. You have a backdrop there, but you also have CG incorporated in this. This is elaborate CG because I can't even tell you where the CG begins and ends. Beautiful CG again. And this is what I'm talking about. This is high quality CG. There's CG which is just on a whole other level. Look at this. This is fantastic. Of course, they only had to focus mostly on the apes. But look how the background fits in with the foreground CG, the lighting. Oh, that's great CG. Now, you see what I'm saying? Do you see the difference? Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Now look at this. You know that's a person put in a CG world. From the ground to the background. There are a couple things that may be real there. But it all looks like almost like a painting. Like the person's in a painting or something. It almost looks like the person's airbrushed as well. And the environment's airbrushed. Doesn't look real. What if I tell you almost everything there is CG? Would you believe me? You can tell this is stage. The plane is the prop. What I like about this though is now we actually have some blurring out of the foreground and background. We didn't have it here, where it looked fake. But here, we actually have blurring outs, which means they're dealing with props. These are literal things and literal people you're seeing here. That's all CG. Yeah. So when people talk about this being better CG than this, and better CG than this, I don't know what they're talking about. This is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. This is some CG from that. It's reasonably well done. Here is, I'm just showing you the point of resolution. So here we have, this is Jason Momoa. In the actual environment, there's CG ice here. So that's the fake part. But everything else is real. And here, he's in front of a screen. You can tell it's a screen because it's flat. And even though he has better resolution, you know he's in front of a screen and he's in the pool. Here, your eyes just simply tell you that. You know, there's something wrong. Here, you can see that he fits into the environment. And it feels like he's in that environment because you can get the depth perception. Besides that, the camera gets out of focus the further away these things are. So, similarly, this feels like Joss Whedon shot this. Doesn't it feel like that? If your eyes can't be deceived by it. So that's the problem. So we know she's standing in front of a flat screen of some kind, flat background. Here, on the other hand, this is a CGI character underwater. Well, it's supposed to be. The illusion is that it's underwater, inside of a boom tube. Lights moving a certain kind of way. The CG there is just, this is crazy CG. This is very difficult to do. Okay? This is very easy to do. This could be done on the CW. This is not easy to do. Which is why this is superior CG to this. And in short, this is why Justice League CG is so much better than Thor Ragnarok. You know what Thor Ragnarok CG is? It's a step up from the CW's special effects and budget they have. The clothing and everything.